Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, aka the 1 out of 10, and this video we're breaking down The Matrix Resurrections. The movie has a lot to unpack from its plot and ending, and throughout this we'll be explaining it to you like you're 5 and going through the whole film. Full spoilers ahead, so if you haven't had a chance to check it out, then you need to unplug. Click the thumbs up button if you enjoy the video, and don't forget to subscribe for breakdowns that will take you tumbling down the rabbit hole every single day. With that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into The Matrix Resurrections. Okay, so The Matrix Resurrections comes from the Force Awakens school of reboots in that it pretty much just takes some major plot elements from the original movie and somewhat remakes them whilst also providing a sequel. We pick up 60 years after the events of the third movie and learn that both Trinity and Neo were brought back to life using extensive technology to resurrect the pair. Turns out that after the events of Revolutions, that though there were decades of peace, the machines realized that the humans were not creating enough energy in order to sustain them. If you cast your mind back to the first movie, it was explained that the machines originally were powered by solar energy, but after the humans destroyed the atmosphere, they instead turned us into a battery. The machines broke out into a civil war, and the analysts played by Neil Patrick Harris realized that Neo and Trinity were needed to keep humanity at bay, and thus they created a new iteration with them at the center of it. In order to convince Neo that his memories are fake, he was told that he's actually a game designer who created the Matrix trilogy for Warner Brothers. In this new reality, he's guided by his mysterious agent who wants him to make a new Matrix, and also the analyst who supplies him with blue pills to keep his powers at bay. Everything about the analyst is supposed to subdue him, and in his room there are black cats, models of the human brain, and butterflies, which are of course a symbol of rebirth. Everything about the analyst is supposed to subdue him, and in his room there are black cats, models of the human brain, and butterflies, which are of course a symbol for rebirth.
Deja vu.
His glasses and clothing are also blue, hinting towards how he's meant to be put in place to subdue Neo. Blue and red imagery are laced throughout the film, and there's also the coffee shop Simulate where a lot of important scenes happen. Not only does the logo incorporate the Matrix green, but Simulate is also very close to Simulate. Smith's room also has several clues in it too, including a bust of Hugo Weaving getting punched in slow motion. Now just as Neo starts to awaken, Smith does too, but we'll talk about this more later on in the video. Now in order to keep the rest of the humans under control, the machines manipulate them, and it's clearly a comment on modern society. We live in a society where we very much create our own fake realities online in which we appear a certain way to the world that often isn't in line with how we are in real life. Yes, that's right, I actually hate movie spoilers. Now the people are so used to losing things that they actually have somewhat lost their agency, and they refuse to take chances or risks, which is of course something that's needed to escape the program. Misery is very much what keeps everything in check, and people would rather just hold on to what they have. I've heard comments like this said a lot about things and how society's structures are often put in place to keep us in line. There was a great essay released a couple of years ago that talked about how governments in the West could easily put an end to homelessness, but if people didn't fear being homeless, then they would quit their jobs on a whim and basically not let corporations control them. It's all fascinating stuff, and it kinda ties into what I see Jude as. We're told that the creators of this new simulation want to keep Trinity and Neo apart, but at one point they're introduced by a program. Neo actually doesn't want to meet her, showing that he's so influenced by fear and rejection that he won't take risks. Now as the analyst reveals later on, the worse that the Matrix manipulates and makes people feel bad, the more energy that they produce. Thus this program centers around keeping everyone in a sustained bubble of mediocrity, and it means that the machines have never been more powerful. Over the decades, several of the humans in the real world have searched for Neo, but the way he looks was changed by the machines so that he appears like an older man. Even though this guy is probably the same age as Keanu Reeves, he's just not a vampire. This alteration of his avatar is known as a digital self-image, or DSI for short. Now though I have said that not many people want to be free, there are some that have escaped, including Bugs, who start to question things after seeing Neo's true face. When they found out that The Matrix had a trilogy of games within it called The Matrix, humanity started to look for Neo, but because his DSI was changed, he couldn't be found. Now Neo attempted to end his own life during a party by jumping off the edge of a building, but he kept going, which sort of ties into the end. Bugs saw this, and this is how she knew that Neo was out there. Now we open with Bugs inside a program used to evolve sentience that is training digital versions of them to be better than what has come before, I think. I've thought on this a while, and I think that we're basically watching the opening of The Matrix play out, because This was something that led to the fall of the machines, and thus they're attempting to train future agents against a Trinity replica. These are known as modals, and we learn that Neo subconsciously created this program within a program so that Bugs could go in and find Morpheus and then find Neo. She comes face to face with the former, who is now playing Agent Smith, and ends up pulling him out of the system. There are several Easter eggs, including keys here, which are of course a nod to the Keymaker. The pair discuss things in a recreation of Neo's apartment, and we learn that Bugs was a window cleaner, which calls back to the first film. Now this idea of digital raindrops being on the window and also Morpheus's mirror gets them on common ground. Much like Smith, he breaks free of his programming and finds purpose. Together they escape, and the search for Neo begins. Now Neo constantly has hallucinations where his visions come back, and thus when he meets the second Morpheus, he naturally doesn't believe what he's seeing. Neo is a man who, much like us, has been influenced by the world around him to stay in line, and though I don't like the execution of the film at points, I do really appreciate the subtext. Now Neo has a sit down with Trinity, who tells him that her children laughed when she brought up that she resembled the character from his game. This was clearly another form of control, and the analyst once more attempts to talk Neo into remaining in the system. He goes to leap off a building once more, but at this point he's found by Bugs, who pulls him out into the real world. Upon getting disconnected, he's saved by a machine, and we learn that those in the real world have allied themselves with Rogue AI. Just opposite his pod sits Trinity's, and we learn that the pair were placed together to maximise the energy output between them. Inside the Matrix, we also learn that Smith was placed there to bring somewhat balance to everything. If you cast your mind back to what the Oracle said, she very much confirmed that Smith and Neo were opposite sides of the same coin, used to bring balance to the program. That's why the analyst has placed them into the new Matrix together in the job roles we find them in, because one is a creative designer, whilst the other is about numbers and figures. After Neo is freed, he's taken to the new home for the humans called Io, which is where the second half of the film begins. Here he meets Niobe, who took over the reins of humanity after the death of Morpheus. In the new home, humans have learned to live with the rogue machines, and just in the same way that those inside the program don't want to rock the boat too much, Niobe very much doesn't want any entanglements either. She's happy just existing, and would rather hold on to what she has than risk anything and lose it. She takes him to Sadie, who you will probably remember from the third film, and she fills him in on all the ins and outs. Inside the Matrix, Neo and Co come face to face with Agent Smith and the Merovingian, who is desperate to see the older version of the program return. He and some of the other exiles have managed to escape deletion, and thus they just want to go back to living it up in fancy restaurants and taking pleasurable bathroom breaks. Now in the second and third film, we learn that he'd been through several iterations of the Matrix, and in this one he's in pretty bad shape. Smith just wants Neo to stay outside of the program so that he can take down the analyst himself, as he's sick of being enslaved. On the opposite side of this, the analyst has convinced his AI rulers that he can bring Neo back into the system. He very much uses Trinity as a pawn and reveals that he's found that if they come together it'll overload the system. However, if they're kept at arm's length, that'll create a near perfect balance that sustains everything. The analyst threatens to kill Trinity if Neo doesn't return to his pod, and this takes us into the third part of the movie in which they attempt to pull Trinity out. The humans, however, can't just yoink Trinity's body out of there, as the analyst will realise and have her killed. Thus they have to use a machine called Kujaku to Kujaku Trinity's body out of a pod, and during this process they have to replace Bugs with Trinity's avatar so that nothing is disrupted. Keep up if you can. Now, during the moment in which Trinity screams, we can actually see Bugs as a part of her, and this is why that happens. Everything comes to a head at Simulate, and the analyst and Neo make a deal where if she doesn't wish to leave the Matrix, that he will have to return to the pods. Initially, when her quote-unquote family arrives, she goes to exit with them, thus remaining in the fake world. However, Trinity changes her mind and decides to leave. The analyst freezes time to kill her, but at this point Smith stops him, breaking free of his own programming. As mentioned earlier, Smith and Neo are somewhat opposite sides of the same coin, and when Neo started to break free, so did he, explaining how he does this. Now Neo and Trinity try to buy Bugs and the others time to carry out the heist in the real world, and this leads to a massive action scene. The analyst throws everything he can at them, including people, and the pair make it to a skyscraper. Both have a leap of faith, and though Neo falls, Trinity now has the powers of the One and holds him mid-air. They're pretty much both the One now, so the two, and though this isn't spelled out in the movie because they're both very much the source code at this point, the pair have the abilities of the One. Now Neo does fly himself on his own at the end though, so it's not like he doesn't possess this, and I'm guessing that this just happens to make us go, wow, it's so amazing. Now the movie ends with Trinity and Neo going to the analyst, and here he tells them that people will choose to remain in this version because they like the world due to the psychological conditioning that they've been subjected to. Though the suits would have purged the code under normal circumstances, the analyst has convinced him he can keep things in check because humans have a need to be controlled. We crave certainty, and he believes that Trinity and Neo will fall in line and return to their pods. However, instead they decide to fly out over the city, which is of course a reference to how the first film ended. They want to show the population what a free mind looks like, and they now control the Matrix. The position of power has now changed, as originally it was the machines controlling the humans. However, as Neo and Trinity can now control the Matrix, they can control the power output. Thus, they very much hold the machines hostage and can remake the Matrix at will to decide how they want humanity to perceive it. Now, the post-credit scene picks up with the game designers talking about how games and media are dead. Instead, they believe that a series of cat videos called the Catrix are what humanity now needs in order to bring us joy. It very much teases the Catrix, and hopefully Warner Bros. Don't pause their plans on that and pussy out of it, eh? Now, as for my thoughts on the film, I was really torn on this one after my first watch, so I went back and checked it out a second time to make sure that I had more of a handle on how I felt about it. That hasn't really helped all that much, but I did think that the first hour of the movie was really well put together. It had a gripping mystery to it, lots of meta commentary and callbacks, and then as they started to pull back the curtain, I feel like it fell apart a bit. Now, The Matrix to me is a 10 out of 10 movie. The entire film is nothing but quotable lines from start to finish, and it not only is one of the best action movies ever made, but it's also one of the most thought-provoking films ever put to screen. Everything in it is incredible. The style, the concepts, the choreography, the cinematography, and like I said, it's a perfect movie. However, it's also over 20 years old, and not only does this film pale in comparison when put next to it, it also doesn't do that much in terms of innovation. The movie cashes in on a lot of nostalgia, and it's very much the Member Berries film. Now, I really don't mind callbacks, but it's just a bit distracting when every time they do one, they actually have to show a clip from the first film just to remind you of what scene they're mimicking. Both No Way Home and The Matrix Resurrections did fan service, but the former used it in a way to build on what had come before and to advance the story. This just seems to sort of be paying homage to the past without really advancing anything in terms of plot. I really felt that when the movie started to get into the second half that it fell apart a bit, and though the final action scene was good, I don't think it ranks anywhere near the ones in the other movies. We got to a point where it was basically just Neo blocking bullets the whole time, and there wasn't the level of choreography that we've had in the other movies. Now, whilst I am ripping it a new one, I do think that conceptually the movie is great, and it has some really brilliant themes in it too. The film is very, very meta, and it does poke fun at itself and basically the franchise model that studios have now adopted. It's almost saying that there's no point in remaking The Matrix whilst also remaking it, so yeah, quite funny, even if it does make you kind of agree with it. Now, the movie just feels like it's a victim of the Hollywood model of reboots, but at the same time, it's poking fun at that, which kinda makes my head hurt. Although I had fun with it, I'm also trying to justify why it exists, and beyond saying that humans these days would prefer to live in social constructs, I'm not sure how much more new things that it brought to the table. However, seeing Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss back is great, and neither miss a beat. There's also the slight change up with Morpheus and Bugs, and I think those four are really solid in the movie. I think this film will be very divisive, and honestly, I can see it being something that grows on people and myself over time. I very much imagine that it'll be like Tenet, where it probably gets better upon repeat viewings, and 2 years down the line people will give it a lot higher praise than it's getting now. The same thing happened with the two sequels, and though I disliked them at the time, they did grow on me eventually. I think it's kinda stupid by Warner Bros. To release it so close to No Way Home, as I think many people will probably just go see that again, rather than taking a risk on a sequel to a franchise that had one great film and two okay ones. The fact it's also dropping day one on HBO Max makes me think it's not going to really make that much at the box office, and as studios are pretty much just big corporations instead of art companies these days, I don't know if this will be the last chapter or not. Now, I am going to revisit the movie again, and I do like the franchise, so I think I'd probably mark it higher than a lot of people. If you don't like The Matrix, I think it's going to be a bit of a slog come the second act, but for someone who did find some enjoyment with it, it gets a 6.5 out of 10. I'd of course love to hear your thoughts, so make sure you comment below and let me know. We are running a competition right now and giving away 3 copies of the Spider-Man 4K trilogies on the 30th of December. All you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is to like the video, make sure you subscribe with notifications on, and drop a comment below with your thoughts on the film. We pick the comments at random at the end of the month, and the winners of the last one are on screen right now, so if that's you, then message me on Twitter at Heavy Spoilers. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of Spider-Man No Way Home, which will be linked on screen right now. We go through the full plot, some of the Easter eggs, and also talk about that ending, so it's definitely worth checking out right after this. If not, then thanks for sticking through the video. I've been Paul, you've been the best, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care, peace.